This is meeting number 139 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts for Tuesday, May 28th, 2019. We are televised today, so for our friends in the audience as well as for all members here, I'd kindly encourage you to put your cell phones on mute, just less distractions. We're here today in consideration of Report 2, Processing of Asylum Claims of the 2019 Spring Reports of the Auditor General of Canada. And we're pleased to welcome this morning from the Office of the Auditor General, Monsieur Sylvain Ricard, the Interim Auditor General of Canada, and Ms. Carol McCalla, Principal. From the Department of Citizenship and Immigration, Ms. Laurie MacDonald, Acting Deputy Minister, and Mr. Bruce Schofield, Director General, Immigration Program Guidance Branch. From Canada Border Services Agency, Mr. John Osowski, President, and Mr. Jacques Cloutier, Vice President, Intelligence and Enforcement Branch. And lastly, from the Immigration and Refugee Board, Mr. Richard Wex, Chairperson, and Mr. Greg Kipling, Director General, Policy Planning and Corporate Affairs. Welcome to our committee, and we'll begin with our Auditor General, Monsieur Ricard, please.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, thank you for this opportunity to present the result of our audit report on the processing of asylum claims. Joining me is Carol McCalla, the principal responsible for the audit. This audit examined how asylum claims were processed by the Canada Border Services Agency, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, and the Immigration and Refugee Board, the three main organizations involved in Canada Refugee Determination System. We found that Canada Refugee System has been unable to adjust to spikes in the volume of claims and is again faced with a significant backlog. Claims are not being processed within the 60-day target set by the government, and the backlog and wait times are worse now than when the system was reformed in 2012. At the time of the audit, we estimated that the backlog will more than double in 5 years, meaning that families and individuals seeking asylum can expect to wait 5 years to find out whether they will be granted protection. Le problème fondamental est que le système reçoit un budget.
The fundamental problem is that the system has a fixed amount of funding to process asylum claims, but the number of claims varies each year. The surge of asylum claims in 2017 quickly outstripped the system's capacity to process them within the required 60 days. In February 2018, the board announced that it would set aside the 60-day requirement as permitted by immigration regulations, and schedule hearings according to when claims had been made. By the end of December 2018, expected wait times for a protection decision had reached 2 years.
Cette lacune est accentuée.
This flaw is made worse by a number of administrative issues that frustrate the efficient processing of asylum claims. For example, we found that the three organizations used different computer systems that did not work well together, resulting in important gaps and errors in the information that was shared. Furthermore, none of the organizations had an upfront quality assurance program to ensure the accuracy and completeness of information collected about asylum claimants. This caused a duplication of effort as well as delays in claim processing and a reliance on paper files.
Nous avons constaté que près des deux.
We found that almost 2/3 of hearings were postponed at least once. The majority of postponements were due to administrative issues within the government's control, such as unavailable board members or delays in security screening. And because new claims were prioritized for a hearing over claims that had been postponed, a single postponement delayed the hearing by an additional 5 months on average.
Finally, few claims that were eligible for faster processing received quicker decisions. The refugee systems allow certain claims to be decided on the basis of a file review rather than a hearing. However, we found that this expedited process was used for only a quarter of eligible claims and was actually rarely faster than the regular process. The other 3/4 proceeded to regular hearings, and 87% of them received positive decisions. As a result, claims that could have been fast-tracked tied up the system instead. We made 5 recommendations. All organizations have agreed with all of them and have shared their action plan with us. Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We would be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ricard. We'll now move to Ms. McDonald, please. Welcome.
Mr. Chair, thank you again for inviting me to address this committee. Today I'm joined by Richard Wex, Chairperson of the Immigration Refugee Board, known as the IRB, and John Osowski, President of Canada Border Service Agencies, referred to as CBSA. Together in our respective roles, we make up the Asylum System Management Board, which I will describe in greater detail. We are here today to address recommendations on processing for asylum claims, an area that is the joint responsibility of our 3 organizations, Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada, IRCC, the Immigration Refugee Board, and CBSA. We will each provide some brief opening remarks, and then we'll be happy to take questions. We would like to thank the Auditor General for his recommendations, which offer important insights that will allow us to continue improving the asylum system. As the Auditor General's report highlights, Canada's system is being tested. We have seen a significant increase in the number of asylum claims over the last 2 years, from both regular claims made inside Canada and from irregular migrants entering Canada between ports of entry at the Canada-US border. Canada's situation is far from unique in this regard, however. The world is now witnessing unprecedented levels of migration. An estimated 258 million people are on the move, and more than 25.4 million are refugees. As a result of these trends in global migration, as has been the case in other countries, Canada's asylum system has experienced increased pressure, and increases in global migration suggest this trend will likely continue. Mr. Chair, this points to the need to ensure our borders and our asylum system are well managed and properly equipped to address an increase in asylum claims. We are committed to the integrity of our border and asylum system as part of the integrity of our overall immigration system, which is based on rules and orderly migration. According to the Auditor General's report, our asylum system requires continued efforts to ensure the system is flexible, that it makes good use of technology, and that this results in greater efficiency and fewer postponements. As noted in the report itself, the government has recognized the need to take action, and this work has begun. More specifically, we are improving coordination between organizations that administer the system. We are changing the way claims are processed to increase efficiency while maintaining fairness. And we are making investments proposed in Budget 2019 to increase the system's capacity to process 50,000 claims per year. Throughout 2018 and continuing now, the government has been taking concrete steps to manage and discourage irregular migration, while maintaining focus on the longer-term need to improve the productivity and management of the asylum system as a whole. The actions we have taken are consistent with the balance that the federal government is seeking to achieve between ensuring that Canada is a place for those who genuinely need protection, while safeguarding the integrity of our immigration system and the safety of our citizens. Mr. Chair, we have also taken to heart recommendations from the independent review of the asylum system, which was completed last year. These recommendations were focused on how to improve the management and productivity of the IRB and the asylum system as a whole. One of the key recommendations of this independent review was to improve coordination between organizations that deliver the asylum system. The Asylum System Management Board was created, in part, to respond to this need. The ASMB, as we call it, which was announced publicly in December, functions within the terms of the Immigration Refugee Protection Act, within the existing mandates of our organizations, and in a manner that is consistent with the adjudicative independence of IRB. The ASMB is helping maximize efficiencies by ensuring that operational challenges are resolved and each organization benefits from the information it needs to deliver the system efficiently. The ASMB makes it easier for us to align our collective priorities, planning, resourcing, and reporting. Additionally, the ASMB will oversee the adoption of the updated performance targets. These will be used to report on claim volumes, processing capacity, and productivity at every step from intake to protection or to the removal of a failed claimant. Last year, the ASMB also supported pilot projects in Montreal called the Integrated Claim Analysis Centre, referred to as ICAC, that has demonstrated a new approach to triaging and processing claims. The centre co-locates IRCC and CBSA employees so that they can work together to provide hearing-ready files to decision makers at the IRB. This approach makes it faster to process claims while ensuring the fairness of decisions. Through the ICAC pilot, our three organizations are working to eliminate duplication and move claims to the IRB more quickly. Given the success, we will be implementing a new ICAC pilot in Toronto, which will process the majority of new asylum claims in the national caseload. This is one of the key investments announced by the government in its most recent budget to increase capacity of the asylum system. To support the expanded ICAC and improve program delivery overall, we are enhancing our IT systems. We will make it easier for people to submit information electronically and to use digital tools. We'll be making sharing information between organizations faster and simpler. This will allow us to move from paper files to digital processing, which was identified as a major need by the Auditor General. And through the ICAC, we will also prioritize and track cases through each step of the asylum system. Together, our organizations have committed to implementing the recommendations we received in the Auditor General's report. This will include seeking greater flexibility in funding, reducing delays in decision-making, making better use of expedited processes, and being more proactive in sharing information. Beyond these measures, we will bring essential new capacity to our organizations, including investments made in Budget 2019 to address pressures felt across the asylum system. A portion of the funding will help manage operations at the border, but the investment clearly recognizes the need to ensure Canada's asylum system can handle higher volumes overall. Budget 2019 invests $1.18 billion over 5 years, starting in 2019-20, and $55 million per year ongoing, to double the capacity of the asylum system to 50,000 claims per year, as well as implement the border enforcement strategy. This funding will allow us to respond to the volume of asylum claims we receive, including those made by irregular and regular migrants. In closing, Mr. Chair, we agree with the recommendations in this report, and we will continue the work that is already underway with the IRB and the CBSA to make the asylum system more efficient without sacrificing its fairness. We have taken concrete steps to address the issues raised in this report with a view to achieving an asylum system that is fast, fair, and final. And we have done so on 3 fronts: through governance and increased collaboration, by increasing the asylum system's capacity through increased funding, and by improving the efficiency and productivity of the asylum system. Thank you, Mr. Chair, very much. My colleagues and I will be happy to respond to questions the committee might have.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. We'll now turn to Mr. Wex, Chair of the Immigration Refugee Board of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm joined today by Mr. Greg Kipling, the Director General of Policy, Planning and Corporate Affairs at the IRB. I'd like to start by thanking the Office of the Auditor General for their report. We were quite pleased to support the audit team during the context of their review, and we very much welcome the report's findings and recommendations. The report's recommendations are both timely and helpful, as the 3 organizations responsible for processing asylum claims, IRCC, CBSA, and the IRB, actively undertake to improve our own operations and, frankly, the system as a whole in light of our changing operating context. Before turning to the Auditor General's recommendations, therefore, I'd like to spend a minute on the IRB's operating context, which, as the audit report makes clear, has changed dramatically over the recent past. Over the last 2 years, the board has experienced the largest intake of refugee claims in its 30-year history. As the intake of claims at the IRB significantly outstripped our funded processing capacity, backlogs and wait times naturally grew. In response, a number of measures have been taken over the past year to help address the situation. First, budgets 2018 and 2019 allocated significant new funds to the IRB to hire additional decision makers and staff which will better align the IRB's processing capacity with the projected intake of refugee claims. The IRB also implemented new measures over the last year to improve productivity, including strengthening our monitoring of performance against productivity targets. We did this on a weekly basis throughout the year, and making changes to our scheduling and case management practices, which enabled the IRB to prioritize certain categories of claims and make more efficient use of our resources. Together, these measures led to important results. Perhaps most notably, for purposes of today's discussion, the board exceeded its funded target of finalizing some 32,000 refugee claims this past year, in fiscal year 2018-19, representing a 30% increase over the previous year's output and the most productive year since the system was reformed in 2012. While the backlog continues to grow, it's now at 75,000 claims, these recent investments and productivity measures have slowed the growth of the backlog by some 15,000 claims from where it would otherwise have been today, and more importantly, wait times for claimants, while still too high, are now averaging less than 2 years instead of 4 years. Moving forward, we continue to prioritize growth and building our capacity to meet Budget 2019 commitments of deciding over 40,000 refugee claims this year and 50,000 claims next year. As such, the IRB is pursuing a number of initiatives as part of a multi-year plan, which has been informed by third-party reviews of the asylum system, including the report that Ms. MacDonald referred to by Mr. Yates, as well as, for our purposes of discussion today, the audit that was just completed by the Office of the Auditor General. It is centered on 3 objectives. That is our multi-year plan. First, improving productivity. Second, enhancing quality and consistency of decision-making. And third, strengthening management with a focus on a systems-wide approach in collaboration with both IRCC and CBSA. Our plan recognizes that more needs to be done to ensure that the IRB, and frankly the system as a whole, more effectively and efficiently processes refugee claims. In that context, the IRB very much welcomes and accepts all 5 of the OAG's recommendations. First, the IRB agrees with the audit's recommendation that all 3 organizations should work with the government to design a more flexible funding model that allows the organizations to more quickly access additional funds following sudden spikes in refugee claims. This recommendation was also made in the 2018 Yates report, and along with permanent funding and developing a contingency workforce are seen by the IRB as critical success factors to reduce the risk of future refugee claim backlogs from developing in the future. Second, the audit found that information sharing gaps exist and manual paper-based processes result in less efficient processing of claims. The IRB agrees that the 3 organizations should work together to collect, first identify, then collect, and better share information to process asylum claims and move to digital processing. This recommendation is aligned with our strategic priorities to improve productivity and enhance quality across the decision-making continuum. For example, shifting to electronic processes to exchange information with counsel and their claimants, as well as working with IRCC and CBSA to identify and implement opportunities to enhance the sharing of information by leveraging recent IT investments earmarked in Budget 2019. Third, the IRB also agrees with the Auditor General's report that we should explore ways to reduce the number of postponed refugee hearings. It's important to highlight, by way of context, that following legislative reforms in 2012, IRCC and CBSA officers who were responsible for referring refugee claims to the IRB had been required to record a specific hearing date in the IRB scheduling system that respected the regulated 60-day scheduling timelines as referred to by Monsieur Ricard, without consideration, though, of the IRB's capacity to hear the case. So with the asylum system overwhelmed, the IRB simply did not have sufficient members to hear the cases within the mandated 60 days of a claim being referred to the board. This then resulted in a majority of the cases being rescheduled to a later date. In response, in 2018, the IRB invoked its regulatory authority to move away from scheduled hearings within the prescribed 60 days, and with the agreement of both IRCC and CBSA, assumed control over its own scheduling. In so doing, the IRB was better able to schedule hearings based on member availability and file readiness, and also began to strategically manage our inventory. For example, we were able to assign cases to members who had developed a certain expertise with certain types of cases, which achieved considerable economies of scale and improved productivity. So these changes, along with the hiring of new members from Budget 2018 funding, have significantly brought down the number of postponed cases from what was reported correctly in the audit at 65% to what is now, since the audit, 36%. While progress is being made, it's clear that further opportunities exist, and the IRB agrees with the OAG's recommendation that we should continue to explore ways to reduce the rate of postponements. The board has already begun reviewing its scheduling practices along with its interpreter program, and coupled with hiring additional decision makers, as well as working with IRCC and CSA to improve file readiness, is committed to further reduce the rate of hearing postponements. Fourth, the Auditor General's report also found that there were opportunities to take greater advantage of the IRB's authority to decide refugee claims based on a file review without a hearing, and recommended that we make better use of the tools at our disposal to speed up decisions for eligible claimants. We agree. Indeed, earlier this year, prior to the release of the audit report, I issued new instructions governing the review of less complex claims and established a 25-member task force to review our entire backlog of claims to identify those claims which would be eligible for expedited reviews, either paper file reviews without a hearing or a shorter hearing rather than the regular hearing under the new instructions. And I'm very pleased to report that over 5,000 claims have now been finalized based on these instructions and the work of the task force since January. The Auditor General's report reinforces the importance of taking advantage of these types of tools and pursuing these initiatives. We will continue to stream less complex claims for expedited reviews to both our current backlog as well as new claims as they come forward and are referred to the IRB on an ongoing basis. And finally, Mr. Chair, the IRB agrees with the OAG's recommendation concerning ministerial interventions and is committed to working with IRCC and CBSA on this issue. In closing, again, I want to thank the OAG for its report. The recommendations are timely, particularly given that my management team and I are squarely focused on maximizing the effectiveness of the IRB and the refugee determination system as a whole. The audit reinforces the importance of a number of actions already underway and highlights a number of additional issues requiring the collective attention of IRCC, CBSA, and the IRB. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my colleagues and I will be happy to respond to any questions committee members may have after Mr. Osowski provides his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wex. We'll now move to Mr. Osowski, President of Canada Border Service Agency.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm joined today by Jacques Cloutier, Vice President of the Intelligence and Enforcement Branch at the CBSA, who will assist me in answering any questions the committee may have. I would like to begin by acknowledging the findings of the 2019 Spring Report of the Auditor General of Canada concerning the in-Canada asylum system. Before I get into some of the details, I would like to quickly provide you with some supporting context, specifically our current operating environment. As stated previously by my colleagues, Canada has seen high volumes of asylum claimants since 2017, on average over 50,000 claims per year. All persons who seek entry to Canada, including irregular migrants, must be afforded due process under the law and must demonstrate they meet the admissibility requirements. The CBSA ensures that both immigration and customs legislation are applied while at the same time respecting international obligations. As a result of the Auditor General's findings, the CBSA and IRCC initiated a comprehensive review of security risk and serious criminality cases, and we concluded that in cases where there was evidence of criminality at the time that the individual made a refugee claim, officers were aware of that information and factored it into their decision-making. We can confirm that none of these individuals represented a threat to Canada and Canadians. Individuals who enter Canada irregularly are arrested by the RCMP or local law enforcement and brought to the nearest CBSA port of entry or inland CBSA or IRCC office for an immigration examination. In order to determine the admissibility of claims, measures such as criminality checks, biographic and biometric verifications, and health screenings are applied. In addition, front-end security screening is a mandatory requirement for adult refugee claimants. It begins at that point of entry, and it must be completed by the time of the IRB hearing date. Various factors, such as the complexity of the case, the level of detail provided in an application, and responses from CBSA's security screening partners may impact the time required to complete this. I should point out that biometrics are primarily used for identity management and verification with our Five Eyes partners, not only for criminality. Criminality can and is checked through various ways, including biometric and biographic checks. This brings us to the Auditor General's findings and recommendations, which we accept. The first recommendation, suggesting more flexibility to better respond to the fluctuating volumes of claims, is an approach we agree with and have been working towards improving. The CBSA, IRCC, and IRB continue to utilize existing funding mechanisms and are working together to explore potential flexible funding approaches to meet current and projected intake. In the view of the doubling of refugee intake since 2016, our agency, with IRCC and the IRB, have already taken a number of innovative approaches to improve the effectiveness of the in-Canada asylum system. An example of this, addressed in the Auditor General's report, is the reallocation of resources to areas with a higher influx of asylum seekers, which significantly improved the timelines of security screening. The Government of Canada has also allocated additional resources to temporarily increase the capacity for refugee intake and for refugee protection decisions. With regard to the second recommendation, suggesting a more proactive sharing of information, I can tell you that the CBSA, IRCC, and IRB are committed to doing just that. The CBSA is seeking to provide its partners with timely notification of its intention to intervene or not in a claim. We remain committed to sharing information proactively with partner countries, such as previous visa applications and biometrics, all while respecting privacy legislation and information sharing agreements. The Integrated Claim Assessment Center pilot project illustrates our commitment to speed up claims processing and demonstrates effective and proactive information sharing in support of program integrity. We will continue to test innovative approaches to further streamline procedures in an effort to avoid duplication and reduce overall processing times. The third recommendation suggests the three organizations collaborate to find ways to collect and share refugee claims more efficiently and securely with a focus on digital. Again, we are in full agreement. The CBSA continues to work with IRCC and the IRB to establish a clear understanding of what claimant-specific documents are to be shared, when, and how. We are establishing a quality assurance program to identify unnecessary delays or errors, and will monitor overall compliance with this approach. Issues such as missing, delayed, incomplete, or illegible claimant information are being identified and addressed in a timely manner. The newly created Asylum System Management Board will ensure effective coordination in the delivery of the asylum system, and we will work to implement a horizontal and integrated management approach of the asylum system as a whole. In addition, we will work together with central agencies to identify options and potential mechanisms to further develop IT capabilities in support of improved interoperability, information sharing, and client service. Further improvements will be made to existing digital interfaces to provide for the exchange of real-time information among the organizations and to support the shift to a digital processing environment. Mr. Chair, we firmly believe that people seeking asylum in Canada must be treated with compassion and afforded due process under the law. We will continue to do so, all the while applying the necessary policies and procedures to promptly remove failed refugee claimants, protect our border, and respect our domestic and international obligations. The resources identified in the 2019 budget will help enable the processing of additional refugee claims, strengthen processes at the border, and accelerate the processing of claims and removals in a timely manner. In closing, I would like to thank the Auditor General for taking the time to closely examine our current asylum system and for flagging important issues to be addressed in order to better maintain the integrity of our immigration system and the safety of Canadians. The CBSA is committed to working with its partners to further improve the process. We would be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have for me or my colleagues. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Because the preliminary testimony has been fairly lengthy, I'm going to be fairly sharp with the 7 minutes, just as a warning. So long speeches won't be adhered to. Mr. Area, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. MacDonald, you mentioned certain very important things, that the world is now witnessing unprecedented levels of migration. 258 million people are on the move, and 25.4 million are refugees. That is very, very huge thing. And you also said that because of these trends, that Canada's asylum system has experienced increased pressure, and increases in global migration suggest this trend will likely continue. So have already identified that. Do you think that you have taken measures to take care of the system going forward?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I think one of the things that the Auditor General report has done for us is it's given us a platform to collectively work together to look at those issues that we have been struggling with in terms of the pressures on the system. It's also allowed us to do what we would call deep dives into the analysis around what is happening around the world and what do we see the impacts on Canada being. So an example would be that since 2017, we've been tracking the countries of citizenship of people who've been coming to us, whether that's regular or irregularly into the country. And what we've seen is that those countries change year by year, which tells us that, along with the migration that's happening around the world, that it's fluid and that can change at any time. So over the next 2 years, one of the things that the funding that we've been given allows us to do is take that deep dive and do that further refinement and finesse around what does that mean to us from a system, and how do we use this collective work that we're doing right now as a result of the recommendations from the OAG to further advance that work and actually support our system going forward to actually have one that's robust, that's able to keep up to the volumes that we're seeing.
My next question is to Ms. McKellar. It may be an unfair question. Subsequent to your audit, you have seen government taking various measures. You have also seen the responses from all the three principals here. In your view, do you think the measures that have been taken since your audit was completed are fair enough or are sufficient enough?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We have had a chance to review the action plan, the responses to our recommendations, as well as the measures that were put forward in budget 2019, which occurred after our audit had completed. And it is very hopeful that the reforms that need to be made to the system that we identify in the report will be undertaken. We do appreciate that they will take time. Some of them are 2 years out. Some of the measures can be taken immediately. Measures that we pointed to, for example, the delays in security screening, were well underway to being resolved by the time the audit had finished. So yes, I think we are pleased with what we see and the actions that the departments are proposing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Vex, I know you have addressed this in your remarks, but I want to ask this again. The reasons for postponed hearings, board member unavailable, 49%. When the hearings are scheduled, it is based on the availability of the member to hear, right? So why is that it's happening?
Thank you for the question. That's exactly right. The issue was with postponements was the interplay between the 60 days that was required under the regulations and the number of members that we had at the time to hear those cases. So the way the practice worked before changes were made was IRCC or CBSA would receive the file and then under the regime needed to schedule a hearing within the 60-day time period without unfortunately having regard to whether there was a member at the IRB able to hear the case. When intake exceeded our processing capacity to such an extent, it was natural that cases would be scheduled in our with the IRB, but there would not be members to hear those cases, and they were understood in the council community to be, frankly, notional dates that would then be rescheduled once IRB took control of the file. Since the audit, it's interesting to note that two things have happened. One, the IRB, in collaboration with IRCC and CBSA, took control over its own schedule. And so rather than a notional date being established, IRCC or CBSA provided a notice to appear to the claimant, but we set our own schedule in terms of the date on which that individual would appear, and it was aligned with when a member was available. And secondly, as a result of Budget 2018 investments, we were able to hire more members, and so therefore there were more members available to hear the cases. As a result of those two variables and our ability to schedule cases that were considered to be more hearing ready because they were older cases, we were able to, since the audit, reduce the postponement rate from, as I mentioned, 65% to 36%, and whereas member unavailability was a contributing factor during the audit at 49%, that has now come down to 30%. So during the audit period, member unavailability was 50% of a 65% problem. Since the audit, it's 30% of a 36% problem, which in real terms means 1 out of every 10 or 11 hearings are being postponed now as a result of member unavailability. That number is going down in the right direction. More work needs to be done, and we've identified the ways that we intend to pursue that in the Management Action Plan.
Quickly, the next reason for postponed hearings is claimant or claimant's counsel unavailable. Yes. With the recent cut by the provincial government to the legal aid, do you think that 14% due to the claimant's counsel unavailable is going to go up? Because most of the asylum seekers, they depend on legal aid for counsels.
Our time is up on that, and so we'll maybe have to work that into a next question. Mr. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, I want to thank the Auditor General for conducting this audit. Many people have raised questions about the overwhelming of the refugee system, and many of those questioners have been accused by the minister of being motivated by xenophobia, insinuations of motivation, perhaps even by racism, rather than actually parliamentarians doing their job and to understand what the government is doing and whether or not it has the resources to cope with a problem, whether or not it's making the right choices to be able to deal with a problem. So I'm pleased that we can have a proper discussion about how the system is working and where its failings are, and there are clearly many failings in the system as identified in this report. So I thank you, Mr. Ricard, for doing so. I heard in the opening statements from both Ms. McDonald and Mr. Wex, actually I think it was Mr. Wex's comments that seemed to contradict the finding in the report. It says that we are on track to be back up to a 5-year delay by 2024, and yet I think in one of the opening statements I noted a statement that no, we were in fact going the other way, and that we are down under 2 years and continuing to shrink. So I'd like that addressed, because this is. I've heard that you accept the findings of the Auditor General, but the Auditor General says that we are headed toward 5 years within 5 years. So please.
Mr. Wex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the question. I'm happy to try and assist with providing some clarification. I think the OAG found that the wait times would have grown to 5 years, and Mr. Ricard can speak to the methodology, as can Ms. McCalla, but I don't think the OAG at that point had the opportunity to consider budget 2019 investments. So I think that explains the difference. So just to be clear, without budget 2019, I would agree with the OAG's findings that.
Okay, so if I may, thank you. That gives me the answer. Will the funding announced in the budget clear the backlog, and if so, when?
So what we're focused on, Mr. Chair, in terms of the next 24 months with the temporary funding in budget 2018 and 2019 is not to eliminate the backlog. It is to position us to eliminate the backlog. It is to slow the growth of the pace of the backlog from what it would otherwise be. And to make this very straightforward, because there's a lot of math, without budget 2018 and 2019, over the next couple of years, the backlog would have grown to 165,000, and wait times would have been, frankly, even greater than 5 years. With the temporary investments, we considerably slow the pace of growth of the backlog from where it is today to where it will be in 24 months.
Okay, but sorry. Okay, go ahead.
And sorry, but just to conclude, and the wait times will stay approximately the same. So we are in a stage now for the next 24 months to manage the growth of the backlog, not to eliminate the backlog, but to position ourselves to eliminate the backlog once the backlog stabilizes.
Okay, so if I may then, so if I understand you correctly, the current funding is going to allow the rate of growth of the backlog to shrink and reach an equilibrium wherein there will be a 2-year delay.
Well, what you're saying is correct as I understand it, which is we are now growing. We're in ramp-up mode to grow the organization and to produce sufficient output over the next 2 years to meet projected intake. Right now, we're funded this year to determine 40,000 claims. We expect claims to be higher than that, and by next year, we expect intake will approximately match our funded processing capacity so that the backlog growth stops.
So 2 years from now, the growth in the backlog will finish growing, and we will merely have a backlog of 75,000 odd people in the queue.
It'll be higher than that, but that's correct. The good news is, well, we project that by the end of 2021, the backlog will be approximately 100,000. And the other fact that I'll share with the committee is that the pace of growth over the past quarter has been the lowest that it's been in well over 2 years, since Q2 of 2016. So the recent Budget 2018 measures, coupled with our productivity improvements, have already considerably slowed the growth of the pace of the backlog and has kept wait times in check from what it would otherwise have been. So the system is being managed.
So do you agree that reducing the number of claims, reducing the number of claimants is that the key to reducing the backlog and wait times?
Absolutely. And so in 2 years' time, the government will have options available to it in terms of how best to reduce the backlog. It's much like what has happened over the course of time, unfortunately, when backlogs have been created, both in the early 2000s and in 2010, where backlogs grew, in part because we haven't always learned from history, and the OAG has pointed out the need for a flexible funding mechanism. Unlike the immigration system, where you can determine how many newcomers to bring in a given year, I'll just quickly end with this. The refugee determination system, of course, we don't determine how many claims come in a given year, and that's the OAG's recommendation.
But you agree, though, that to reduce the backlog and wait times, you need to reduce the number of claims.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to Mr. Christofferson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for being here today. Appreciate it. I want to pick up on the last discussion, and I jotted some things. My first thought as I was listening was that in terms of the backlog, you have a plan to get a plan. By 2021, you think it'll be 100,000, the backlog. you've slowed the growth, and the system is being managed. These are just some of the things I jotted down. And to me, it sounds like floodwaters. I mean, you're managing the disaster, but we're not getting at the cause, and we're certainly not getting at the immediate problem, which is the backlog. It's astounding, quite frankly. I mean, it's a plan and designed to fail because it doesn't meet the total intake, and it still leaves a growing backlog. So there are more fingers and more holes in the dike here than I can count. Quite frankly, it's overwhelming that we're at this stage and with an auditor report in front of us, and I still don't like what I'm hearing, and this is the best you can spin it. This is the best way it can be framed. I mean, I've had people, I want to go to, just to segue poorly, to the security screening results still pending as an example. That's 10% of the reasons for postponed hearings. You know, something needs to be done there because I get it. I mean, I'm a former justice minister. I get security better than most people. But I've also had constituents come in crying, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, crying because they've been waiting so long. They've actually gone ahead and started a life. And here's the thing about the security thing that throws me. If they're not a threat, why are we keeping them on tender hooks for up to 10 years? I've had people up to 10 years waiting, not knowing when there's going to be a registered letter telling them they got to leave. And if they are a threat, what are we doing letting them walk around for 10 years free and clear? So there's something wrong there. And again, when I look at it from the human point of view, I'm from the working world. I get it. Nobody wants to be the one that said, yeah, they're safe and hands it off and worried about they're going to be the one at an inquest sometime wanting to know why they made this decision. So the easy thing to do and the safe thing to do is just don't do anything. So just give me your thoughts on that, if you would, please, because that one is, again, lived experience. You had enough people cry in your office because they don't know what to do, and you can't help them. And it's right there. It's at security. And you should know that when we phone, there is a concrete wall that we cannot get past. And all we are told, even confidentially as MPs, is it's with security. And that's it. So just some thoughts on that, please, and on my opening mini rant.
Okay.
Ms. McDonald or Mr. Wex?
Okay, I'll start off. Thank you for the comments, and I appreciate the passion. 2 points on the backlogs. A plan for a plan. I guess I would just respond by saying a couple of things. Like all backlogs, you need to slow the growth of the backlog before you can begin to eliminate it. So that's the process that we're in right now. We will eventually be in a position to seek funding to reduce and eliminate the backlog over time. And that is the plan that was followed in the past successfully by the board. Unfortunately, in the board's 30-year history, there have been backlogs, and then over time they do get reduced. You slow the growth of the backlog first, and then you eliminate the backlog. But I appreciate the members' comment. On screening, I would simply note that since the conclusion of the audit period this past summer, no hearings have been postponed on account of security, in the sense that we have now, as a result of the work that CBSA has done in dedicating increased priority to security screening and resources, coupled with the IRB's controlling its own schedule, so we are choosing files that are hearing ready as a result of our ability to look at our inventory. We're in a position to schedule hearings where the front-end security screening has already been completed. So I'm pleased to report and to assure this committee that not only has member unavailability gone down as a reason for postponements, but so too has security screening to the point where it's actually 0% since September.
Thank you. And just a reminder, all these things that we're hearing, and some of that's good. I'm glad to hear all of this. This is a result of the Auditor General report, the very report, the number of which the government is trying to cut and slash so that there are less of these reports. Get used to it, colleagues. You're going to hear this from now until we leave. This business of cutting the budget or denying the increase of the budget to the Auditor General, which means the next Parliament's going to have fewer audits. I can't believe there aren't more people outraged about this, but I'll be getting on that at another time, trust me. I'd like to move to page 11. This one just jumped out at me. Yeah, it is a short question, believe it or not, truly. It says, furthermore, new claims were prioritized over those that had been postponed, resulting in delays of several months for postponed claims. So if you were an old claim and a new claim, the new claim got priority over the old claim. Where's the natural justice in terms of first come, first serve?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the OAG did find when they did a deep dive on postponements that what would happen is that a case, for example, could be in the middle of the hearing. And as you know as a lawyer, okay, well, you know from your practice. Well, you know from your previous justice days, I would say that the reality is, in the context of the hearing, you may schedule a hearing for 2 hours, but for natural justice reasons, the hearing runs out of time before the hearing can conclude. So there's a continuation. The member says our 2-hour time slot is up. We need to reschedule the hearing. The way the IRB had been managing its schedule is we schedule 3 to 4 months out. We block a schedule 3 to 4 months out. You could say, well, a number, 50, 60, 30 now % of hearings are postponed, so why don't we create a 30% of our schedule keep vacant on account of potential postponements? But we would be criticized for that if we had a schedule for the next 3 or 4 months that was 30% vacant. So we are always challenged with the reality that when intake exceeds funded processing capacity, as was the case during the audit, less so now, we run into these operational challenges. And so what the Auditor General reported was that new cases were coming in and they were bumping cases that had already been postponed. But we are working with the management team to deal with this issue, and I can tell you that I've sat in on a number of hearings, and what actually happens is they run out of time, the member calls registry, and they say, look, we need another hour. Can you find a time slot over the next couple of weeks? They work with claimants' counsels, and they find a time to reschedule this more and more, much more quickly. And I can tell you why. Members have already prepared for the cases. It's in their interest. They're seized with it. They've already begun to develop their theory of the case. Evidence has been adduced. They want to finish the case as soon as possible. We will be working over the summer months on developing a protocol to identify how best to fit postponements into an already booked schedule. Overtime, overbooking, and other operational strategies are being looked at.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wex.
Another plan to get a plan.
Ms. Mendez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. In my past life, I worked quite a number of years in immigration refugees. That was my life. And I'm disappointed, astounded, flabbergasted that 30 years on, we're still talking about exactly the same things we did in the 80s about then the Iranians and Lebanese. And I mean, there was a great deal of issues right then, but we're still talking about the same things. And one thing that jumps at me, and all three of you referred to it, from page 3 of the Auditor General's report on 2.13 about the issues around electronic processing. How are we in 2019 still talking about this? It boggles my mind. How has Australia, for the past 15 years, been able to do this electronically so much better than we? They are a federation too, so it's not the excuse that they are a central nation or whatever. They are a federation like we are. How have they managed to do so much better than we at the electronic processing of files? I don't understand. 10 years ago, I was in the Immigration Committee, and we were asking exactly those questions already because the Auditor General had already mentioned that. So what is the issue? Ms.
McDonald.
McDonald, whomever, I just don't
Ms.
understand.
McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take a stab at it. We absolutely agree with the OAG's recommendation report in terms of having to move from a paper-based process to a digital-based process. And one of the things that we've struggled with, obviously, is that departments work independently of each other, and we don't always connect our IT systems. I think it's just the reality as departments grow up in terms of how they develop their priorities with respect to IT. And one of the struggles that we've had as a system is that our IT systems have developed separately, and so has our culture around the issues that we take on from a technology perspective. The audits allowed us to bring the group together to say, okay, how do we put a governance structure around this to actually affect that recommendation? So some of the things that we've done, I'll just give you some detail on it because I think it will help lend to understanding some of the issues we faced and where we're going. So the ASMB that I talked about in my opening comments has really given us a platform to collectively work together. So we meet approximately every 6 weeks. And the issues that we talk about are the ones that fundamentally, from a governance perspective, are having the biggest impact on the system. So IT is an example of one of those subjects. The investments of the recent budget gave us approximately $120 million for IT projects divided between us. And what we did as soon as the budget was announced, we actually had an ASMB board, and we talked about what are the priorities that we needed to identify to actually affect this. We then reached out to shared services and to PSPC to bring them to our table so that we're not fighting an uphill battle, that we actually have the departments that can actually enable that to help us make that a reality in terms of coming into the digital age, part of our planning. So as a result of that, we now have a working group formed at the kind of senior executive level that's bringing our 3 organizations and those other 2 departments together to effect a plan. So since that time, we've already identified milestones between now and the end of December. We've identified milestones for our project plan. We have people working on what are the greatest needs versus what can be identified for the outer years, and how we can actually affect that in responding to the OAG's recommendation in terms of actually implementing a technology plan that will move us from a paper-based process to a technology-based process. We're very confident in the work that we've done to date that we actually will be able to realize that along the way. Very complex systems, because we have grown up separately from each other. Our technology systems don't talk to each other.
Ms. McDonald, I understand what you're telling us, and I get it, but this is not a new problem. This is not a new issue. It's been identified by the Office of the Auditor General for over a decade. And what really surprises me and angers me, if you wish, because it does impact on people's lives, on direct people's lives, is that it hasn't been done. There's no explanation for that. Nobody can explain to me why for the past 10 years, nothing has been done to make this move.
I can say to you that effective in the last year as we've come together, we've put a number of processes in place. I can't answer to the past, but I can tell you that we are seized with it. So I'll just give you another example. We launched a pilot, the ICAC that I referred to. And one of the reasons that we wanted this pilot is because we needed to see in practical terms what the pain points were. What are the duplication pieces that we're experiencing? What are the roadblocks that we are creating that's impacting Richard in his area in terms of his work? We did that because we needed to see that to inform what was going to happen with the pilot, with the IT process as well.
I understand, and I mean, I commend you for doing that. But just the example, very simple, and that was actually mentioned in one of the previous Auditor General reports, but about citizenship. This specifically about refugee claimants. The identification of people. You don't have a standardized form where people put the last name, the middle name, the first name. It's not the same throughout. So you get these confusions of names. I mean, like Mr. Christopherson, I have people in my office every single week with issues with IRB. And it's heart-wrenching because we can't really, even not touching the security aspect, we can't really help them to resolve the issue. Some things that seem so basic. Birth dates, you know, just another thing. How difficult is it to put a birth date down?
One of the issues that we're actually working on right now is a quality assurance process for that exact reason that you've identified, so that we can have systematic forms available so that it's not confusing to the applicants, that when they're actually submitting their information that we have consistency across the system. And their quality assurance process is actually built on ensuring that we not only develop the forms, but have them available digitally, and make sure that we actually aren't creating duplication in the system. So those pieces are going in parallel to the other projects initiatives that we have in place as well, to actually address that issue that you've identified, that frustration that clients experience in the system in terms of not being consistent and coherent.
Thank you, Ms. McDowell. Mr. Davidson, please. We're in the second round, so those are 5-minute rounds.
Good morning. Thanks, all the witnesses appearing here today, and thanks again to the Interim Auditor General for being here. This report is obviously very concerning to me as a member of Parliament, and I think to most Canadians. I mean, again, like my colleague said, there's more holes in this ship than it's almost where do you start. But anyways, we'll cut right into it. When I look at the Auditor General report, and even in the Auditor General's opening finding, we have a technology gap, and there was gaps and errors in the information that was shared. I think Canadians want to be assured that any asylum seekers that are being here now, they have been processed in a way that we don't have to worry about any criminals being in Canada at this point, just due to obviously there's a technology gap, and was there anything missed at all in that respect? So if you could touch on that, and does your organization keep track of how many asylum seekers have criminal records and what those numbers are?
Certainly. So thank you for the question. As I said in my opening remarks, we went and looked at the sample that the Auditor General pulled to assure ourselves that the criminality had been dealt with. And it's clear to me that in every instance when someone was making their asylum claim, the officer was aware of the criminality at play at that point in time. I should point out that criminality can occur before they arrive in Canada, or it can occur after they arrive in Canada, but before they go to a hearing. So they could have come in, criminality was, there was no criminality at play. While they were waiting for whatever period of time before the IRB, they have a DUI or some other kind of criminal offense. That was always surfaced to us because we do the screening process right up until the point of the IRB hearing to assure ourselves that anything that happened while they were in Canada is accounted for when the decision maker reviews the file.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep. No, thank you. My next question would be to the Auditor General. In your assessment, is there currently significant funding and oversight to ensure that asylum claims are processed and decided in a timely and appropriate manner? Because I'm just looking at what's been budgeted, at the numbers around 50,000, and I look in the report on page 5. You know, in 2018 alone, there's 55,000 asylum claims. In 2018 alone, which is 5,000 really over the budgeted amount. I'm just, you know, people are concerned that this is like the deficit. We're never going to catch these numbers, given the budgeted numbers. Has the government put enough money aside?
I'll say two things on that. As was mentioned earlier, it appeared that it will not quite deal with the backlog. The backlog will in fact increase. So it depends from what angle you look at your question. If you're talking about covering the inflow and dealing with the backlog, well, no, there's not enough funding from that perspective. The second thing I would say, what we recommended in our report is having a mean to have quickly, easily, have a flexible system that would allow for quick access to money when there's a fluctuation in the volume of claims, right? So having additional money today, all good and fine. It will not deal with the backlog for a number of years, it appears. But it will be important that it become more than just a point in time adding money to the system, but allowing the organization to quickly having access to funding whenever there's fluctuation.
Right.
You have 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Quickly. Okay, no.
Maybe we'll just go on and
go on.
we'll bring it back. We'll now move to Ms. Yip, please.
Thank you for coming. So Mr. Davison had just asked Mr. Ricard the question about the 50,000 claimants, and I would like to ask the same question to Ms. McDonald. How does your organization propose to manage with the increased migration globally? I expect our claimants will rise with just budgeting for 50,000 and then still also managing the backlog.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I would actually identify a number of important points here. One of the things that the government did in terms of investing money in the recent budget was give us a 2-year time frame to take a look at what's happening in our system. So I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks, and I think in one of the earlier questions, that when we're taking a look at what's happening around the world with respect to migration and what we see coming into our country, it's allowed us to have this opportunity to kind of do a deep dive in terms of what does that analysis tell us. And one of the things that has really assisted us is our ASMB that we've identified, so that we're all talking kind of the same language and identifying the pressures that we see amongst each other. Because what that does then is allows us to identify where can we address efficiencies, like where can we find efficiencies, where can we reduce duplication, and what kinds of initiatives can we put in place to actually help us realize developing more robustness in the system. What that will do, it'll help us over the next 2 years work with the Treasury Board around what is the right funding model that then has more finesse to it, because we don't know if the number will stay 50,000. We don't know if it'll go to 45,000. We don't know if it'll go to 55,000. So these 2 years of being able to get some good intel, to take a look at what's happening with trends, to develop our own efficiencies, to reduce duplication, to get technology on board, all that will feed into what the number will really mean. These are best guesses in terms of numbers based on some history, but as we look at these trends, it'll help us get to that place, I think, in a better way. And I would give an example. Irregular migration has been consistently high over the past 2 years. But what we see right now between January 1st and May is a 46% decrease. So when you see a big swing down like that, it impacts what happens to Richard at the board in terms of how many cases he has to look at. As removals, as the work that John does in his area moves forward, it actually impacts what's happening at the end of the system. So what we're collectively doing together is it's like a puzzle, taking all those pieces, trying to determine our best information to determine what numbers we will have. And at the same time, we're actually learning from those processes. We're becoming more effective and efficient. We're actually looking at our pilot that we're doing in Toronto as an example, beginning in September, will in and of itself increase efficiencies much more quickly. So I don't know that the number will be 50,000 or 70,000, but what we will know is that we're collectively working together, and each of these pieces will actually help us get to the end state in terms of what those numbers look like, and all that work will help us make decisions in the end.
Can you expand on that pilot program? It's called the Integrated Claim Analysis Center, and can we learn anything from I think it was successful in Montreal, and how does that apply to the Toronto model, and if there are any differences that Toronto may have?
Thank you for the, yes. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. A couple of really important things, and I'll turn to my colleague, Mr. Schofield, here in a second, who's a really good expert in this area.
Montreal really helped us in a really practical way kind of see our blemishes. They, really helped us see where we had duplication. It forced us to come together and have those real conversations about, well, why are we doing it this way when you do it that way? And is that creating an impact, a negative impact in the system? And it also helped us realize some very good lessons learned in how we could actually quickly adapt and actually make things easier as we went down the road. It's a very paper-based project in Montreal. The project that we're going to go to in Toronto is actually more electronically based, so we actually expect to see some more efficiencies. But those lessons learned from Montreal will really help situate us for the much bigger project in Toronto, which I think, Bruce will correct me here, but I think deals with around 55% of the national cases. But I'll just ask Bruce to comment.
Mr. Schofield, please, and quickly.
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Chair, as the deputy noted, Montreal was really a proof of concept operation. We looked at about 2,000 cases. It was largely a paper-based context in which we're working in Montreal. In Toronto, or more accurately in the central region, about 55% of the national caseload is processed, so about 28,000 claims will be dealt with. We're going to build on the lessons of Montreal. In Montreal, we were largely focused on the process leading up to when a case was hearing ready at the IRB. We'll continue that work to continue to try to achieve enhanced efficiencies across the system, but we'll be adding additional components to the pilot in Toronto, including a post-decision case management process that we think will help CBSA manage its involvement with claimants leading up to removal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schofield. We'll now move back to Mr. Kelly, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. And listening to the line of questioning from my colleague, Madam Mendez, is not having the benefit of her experience of being directly involved in the system over the years. That's some really troubling, that was a very troubling line of questioning. And so if 10 years ago, another parliamentary committee had identified the problems of which this report addresses, I want a better answer on why has nothing been done over the last 10 years to address problems that were clearly identified, and yet here we are again now with another Auditor General's report talking about the same things. This is a committee where we look backward and demand accountability from public servants for the how public funds are expended. So please.
Ms. McDonald.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So, I'll start off by saying that I think it's important to recognize over the course of the past 10 years, things have been done. It's not that it's been silent or that work hasn't progressed in terms of advancing some of the areas around technology. It's that, grosso modo, the entire system hasn't been connected together. So an example I would give you is that, just referring back to the ICAC pilot, in Montreal, it's all paper-based. Clearly, the technology's not there. The systems aren't talking to each other. In Toronto, however, they've already moved, they have the technology, they've moved to a digital process. So it's an example where pieces of the system have been worked on. CBSA has advanced some of its IT systems. IRB has, we have, but not systematically together. So there's pieces that have been addressed, but now we're coming together to do the entire system.
Okay, that's disappointing. In your comments, you said something that struck me as well. You talked about the recent spike in refugee asylum claims has caused you to do what you called a deep dive into your information. You talked about what I thought you said was beginning to track country of origin data. I found that staggering. I thought, I can't believe that that's not something that the department has, since its inception, kept track of.
Of course.
The Auditor General has identified global trends and of migration, and surely as part of being able to have data for proper policy decision making, you would keep track of something like that. Really, it was really 2017 when you started keeping track of where asylum claimants came from.
Ms. McDonald.
Yes, thank you for the question. And just for clarity, of course, the system, the organization has tracked migration and asylum refugee numbers for many, many years. What we started tracking more in-depthly, when I speak about the kind of deep dive in terms of intelligence, is what's been happening on the irregular side of the house and moving backwards in terms of, well, how is that happening and where are they coming from? So it's the more detailed information with respect to understanding what's happening in other countries that would then encourage people or convince people that maybe it's better to go to another country and cross the border irregularly, or come to a port of entry and ask for asylum. So it's really about looking the detail of that over the past couple of years to help us identify some of those issues and trends we may be seeing. So a country may be experiencing some significant economic situations that then encourage people to go look to another country like Canada for an opportunity. So understanding what's happening there with their visa system, do they have robust passport systems, are we seeing fraudulent activities? That's what I mean about tracking and looking at information. But of course, we track information for many, many years.
Okay. So everyone, I assume, agrees that Canada must have a compassionate and rules-based system. And you mentioned in your opening remarks that that you wish to strive for fast, fair, and final decision making. Do you consider an end goal of getting the wait times down to 2 years and holding at 2 years to be fast, fair, and final?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I would say a couple of things to that point. The entire system is working together to address a number of complex issues to be able to get to an effective processing time. The investments that we received today allow us to start chunking away at that. As Mr. Wex indicated, that you have to start someplace in terms of your plan to be able to move towards addressing the issue, and that's what we're working on right now.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Just on a follow-up to Mr. Kelly's question, can you tell us, you talked about country of origin or where they came from. How many came from the United States?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. It actually changes every year.
Well, in the last 2 years, 3 years.
So just to give you an example, in terms of so far this year, the top 5 countries would be India, Iran, Mexico, Nigeria, and Colombia. In 2000 and this so far this year, they would be 11th on the list.
Citizenship, is it?
Right. Yes.
I'm asking where they came from. Which country they came from?
They would have come from India, Iran, Mexico, Nigeria, Colombia.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. This year. In 2018, we would have Nigeria, India, Mexico, Colombia, Iran, Pakistan. In 2017, we'd have Haiti, Nigeria, USA.
So where does the United States fit in?
In 2017, they were third.
Third.
Mm-hmm. And so far this year, they're 11th.
All right, thank you. Come back to that in a bit. Mr. Sarai.
Thank you.
She didn't mention U.S. third.
Ms. McDonald, I'm a bit troubled when I hear that there is system integration issues. Like you're saying, Montreal is still paper-based, but Toronto, you're starting it. Why can't we use the efficient systems all around if we know that it works better?
So in Montreal, as Mr. Schofield indicated, it really was the start of the proof of concept. And so one of the things that identified to us is that how we need to start addressing the technological system. So it's not, you can't just have one department address it. All 3 areas have to. And because all of their systems are different, how we tackle that has to have that comprehensive approach. And that's why I indicated that we have to work with shared services and public service, shared services and PSPC, so that they can help us work through all of those very complicated systems to bring us on board. Because one will be further in one place than the other department will be. And so in order to advance, to get to that technological place where we're all speaking to each other, it will work, the project plans will work at different paces. So in order to do that, this is going to take us 3 or 4 years to get there.
But the process is in the works?
The process has already started. certainly in the last year, but more so in the last, I would say, 6 or 7 months. We've got a number of initiatives already underway.
Mr. Wex, I understand in the IRB you have a lot of challenges. You can have surges that grow exponentially in a year, and then you can have probably droughts, I assume, but it seems like we have less droughts and we have more surges in terms of immigration and particularly the refugee saga. And you brought it down, I believe, due to the delays due to IRB adjudicators, down from, I think, 49% to 30%. How are you able to design a system that can be nimble enough, that can grow and when the surge happens so that we don't get these huge delays and then catch up maybe on slow times? I understand it's not one of those predictable variables like immigration planning, but we need to get this right so that we don't have challenges. And have you looked at systems that might be able to handle that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the question. This goes back to one of the fundamental findings, I believe, that the Auditor General identified in the report and that previous reviews have identified, which is that of a flexible funding model. So what does that mean? Right now, this coming year, we're funded for over 40,000 claims, and next year for 50,000 claims. But let's say through the Asylum System Management Board that Ms. MacDonald has been speaking about, after the first quarter of the year, we see that, guess what? We don't have 15,000 claims in the first quarter. We actually have 20,000 claims or 22,000 claims. We would then be able to, on that basis, performance tracking, inform central agencies, Treasury Board and others, that our forecast was off. And at that point, we could be able to access additional funds because the intake is higher than we had forecasted. As opposed to what happens now is we wait the entire year, even though we could see the trend increasing, and we say at the end of the year, guess what? We had 70,000 claims instead of 45,000 claims. Let's put together a funding proposal for the government to consider in their annual budget. And then the budgetary discussions take place. We may or may not get funded. If we do, it may or may not be 100 cents on the dollar. It's earmarked. Funding actually only comes later in the spring/summer, and then you're ramping up. Well, at that point, you're 18 months down the road. Then we have to hire, recruit, train. You're 2 years down the road before you hit productivity numbers, and you've created a real backlog. This has been the history of our refugee determination system from time to time over the past 30 years. A flexible funding model, as the OAG recommends, would be a success factor to help prevent backlogs from accruing.
And I completely agree, but can we also do where you have a roster of perhaps IRB adjudicators that you can go on call when you need that are past adjudicators, so you don't have to retrain and hire new ones?
So very quickly, just on that, money's good, but money without people doesn't do a lot. We need a roster. We need a contingency workforce. So in addition to permanent funding, a flexible funding model, as you've suggested, you need a contingency workforce, which we have used in the past, for example, with the Legacy Task Force, and we are currently calling out former members, former justice lawyers, former retired judges, and so on and so forth, to develop such a contingency workforce in the event that we're in a position to draw on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wex. Mr. Sarai. Now move to Mr. Christopherson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, on page 2.7, there's a reference to an independent review commissioned by the government that recommended further system-wide efficiency improvements to the asylum system, and quote, would you be sure to forward a copy of that report to our analysts, please?
Mr. Chair, we'd be happy to.
Great, thank you. Here's the question. You can see all of us are just like, I'm not overly impressed with things like enhanced efficiencies. I've been around politics for an awfully long time, and I know that means exactly nothing. So I do have some concern. Here's my question. And Auditor General, this is going to be one of those that you don't like because it's outside the normal box, but I'd like, if you're comfortable, to comment also. we're looking at a 100,000 backlog. If we manage well and do a really good job, we'll only have 100,000 backlog. Let's just pretend there's an election coming, and let's further pretend that there are political parties that might want to do something about this. How much money would it take up front, 100% dedicated to this problem, to eliminate that 100,000 and get us back to where we should be? What would that dollar figure look like? Please, your thoughts. First, the deputy and whoever she wants to defer to, but then the Auditor General, if you're comfortable. And I realize it's up in the air, but give it a shot, please.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Two important things for me. I think that one of the things that's helping us right now is the fact that we got this 2-year funding, the $1.18 billion, because over the next 2 years, all of these pieces that we've been talking about here this morning are each month we are learning from, and we actually are achieving more efficiency. So over the course of the next 24 months as we go through this process, we'll actually have a much better understanding of what we've been able to achieve in terms of efficiencies and what we haven't been able to achieve.
Deputy, I appreciate that, but with the greatest of respects, please answer my question. 100,000 backlog, what are we looking at? Is it $1 billion? What is the number that it would take if a political party wanted to put it in their platform? What is that number?
I haven't costed that number out. I can tell you
that.
Help
me. Give me some idea.
I can tell you that.
A couple of billion isn't getting us too far, so...
Well, if you take 1.18 billion, and that's going to help us get a hold of the backlog, you can extrapolate from that. You could extrapolate from that it's going to be in the couple $1 billion range, but I don't have a costing figure for that.
Thank you. Auditor General, I noticed in one of the paragraphs you do mention you looked at some funding. It was relative to a specific part of your report, but can you help me at all, sir? And I appreciate this is difficult waters for you because your business is precision. Can you help us at all?
Well, in paragraph 2.3, we do refer to the fact that they had a funding base of $260 million. That will not be exact science, and I will defer to the organization to come up with some numbers at some point. But we do refer that $216 million was the base, I'll call it base funding. Then there was additional funding to increase the capacity to 32,000, I think it was, by adding 174 million. So just using that math could help one having a ballpark figure in terms of how much you need to deal with the additional 174. I think you end up at 32,000 capacity. So we need to go up at 50. Let's say we assume it's 50 is the normal amount every year. Then using that, someone could maybe estimate a ballpark figure how much you would need to then deal with the backlog.
Okay.
Maybe I'll just help out on this because there's numbers that are
very quickly.
Well, to answer the question, there's so many variables in play. It's everything. Nothing is static. So both Ms. McDonald and the Auditor General are correct in what they're saying, but. If you look at 100,000, you can calculate per claim what it would cost to bring that number down, and it's not in the billions, it's in the hundreds of millions, but perhaps 300 million, 400 million. But the point here is these monies would need to be spent in any event. These claims are coming in. It's not because there's a wait time or a backlog. So from an IRB perspective, the cost is the same. Whether there's a backlog or not, these claims would be presented to the border, and we would need to process them.
Mr. Christopherson, you had one other thing?
I just wanted to mention that first of all, it makes my head explode. I got to tell you, I agree. It's been around so long, and there's no easy answer. And your folks are very good at giving answers that don't get us very far. And you're not doing it deliberate. You can only do the best you can. Last thing I just want to mention, though, to underscore the argument about how devastating it is that the Auditor General is not getting the funding they need to do their audits. The deputy mentioned in her comments the audit allowed us. And I'm going to continue to point out the benefits of having these audits because the current government's intent is to not provide sufficient funding to the Auditor General to do this very work. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for closing off on that note. We'll now move to Mr. Kelly, please. And then Mr. Chen.
Thank you. So I wanted to be clear and maybe pick up then with, or get a little more clarity. Mr. Christofferson asked for a dollar figure that would actually clear the backlog, but I noted that the answer that got back was regarding what it is expected to take merely to get to a point of equilibrium where the backlog doesn't get longer. And that's I don't think that's not what anybody's goal should be. For reasons that have been that has come out already, we all know from our constituency office work the impact on lives in our community that communities that the backlogs have. The only thing that will shrink the backlog and actually clear our lists based on the current funding, which is something that we can control, is an actual reduction in the number of asylum claimants. Is that what both agencies are more or less hoping or relying upon to actually make real progress and actually shrink the backlog rather than just shrink the rate of growth of the backlog?
Mr. Wetz.
Thank you for the question. It's a combination of measures that's going to be required. Just to be very clear, over the next 24 months, we are focused on stabilizing the backlog with the recent investments of some over $200 million for the board over the next 2 years. It will allow us to ramp up at the pace that we can only ramp up, frankly, in order to develop a processing capacity to meet the intake. And at that point, you are correct. The backlog, based on forecasts of 60,000 claims coming in a year, it may not be that much, will be in and around 100,000. At that point, the government will have options available to it, including, as has been done in the past, dedicated funding to reduce the backlog, because at that point the backlog is no longer growing, and to reduce the backlog at 100,000. It is correct to say that based on how much it costs to process a claim, including both the Refugee Protection Division and the Appeal Division, it's been calculated to be between some $200 and $400 million, depending on various variables.
Okay. You were quite candid in your remarks about the system being overwhelmed, about the system not having the capacity to deal with the influx of claims. Had this been adequately conveyed to the minister?
As I mentioned earlier, this is precisely why the government has recently invested in the whole system, IRCC, CBSA, and the IRB, as a result of the influx that occurred largely in 2017. That resulted in investments in budget 2018 and 2019. What happened in budget 2018 is the IRB was able to process an additional 10,000 claims, actually a little bit more than what it previously was able to process as a result of those investments. The truth is, in 2018 and now in 2019, the IRB would not have been in a position to grow any more than those investments provided. It's not a large organization, and over the course of 3 years, we're growing from 1,000 people to 2,000 people.
The reason I asked the question about whether the minister was aware of his system being overwhelmed is he spent considerable energy dismissing claims that Canada was not prepared and not able to deal with the claims that came in, and that the intake of claims was resulting in lengthening wait times, and which was unfair to people that were relying on the system and to be able to get their hearing. We're in extra rounds now, so unless there's a further comment on that, I'll leave it at that.
I would just build a little bit on Mr. Kelly. One of the advantages of being in the chair is I get questions on occasion, not necessarily now, but on occasion that we may want to see in the study. We've already asked the question about the amount of money that would be needed in order to mitigate the increasing backlog. What would, if the asylum seeker number was down at 30, like according to the AG, he says that with 50,400 claims, more than double the number from the previous year. He's talking back in 2016-17, 55,000 in 2018. If we had asylum seekers at 25,000 or 30,000, how quickly would the backlog be in check?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if intake was at 25,000 and we will be funded at 50,000 over the course of the next 24 months, at that point, year over year, we'll be able to reduce the backlog by 25,000 because you're funded at 50 and there's only 25,000 coming in. That gives you an additional 25,000 to reduce the backlog. That would reduce the backlog in less than 4 years.
Thank you. We'll now move to Mr. Chen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As our witnesses very well know, in 2012, fundamental changes were made to the asylum system, and these changes included new legislated timelines that forced a hearing to be scheduled within 30 days or 60 days. However, these rules did not apply to claims that were submitted prior to 2012. This, as a result, created a backlog of 32,000 people, the so-called legacy backlog, some of whom have been waiting for a hearing for 7 to 8 years through no fault of their own. It's my understanding that there was a special task force that was set up in 2012 to help clear this backlog. Can one of our witnesses update us on the progress of the work of that task force?
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, I'm pleased to report that as a result of the work of the task force that was established within the Immigration and Refugee Board, that the backlog associated with those 32,000 claims, which were holdover claims from the system's reforms in 2012, all new claims after the system reforms were subjected to those 60-day time periods that you referred to, or slightly different timelines depending on the country of origin. But there were 32,000 claims that were part of the new system, but not subjected to the 60 days. And so what happened is they were not prioritized in our schedule. And that 32,000, therefore, was a backlog that needed to be dealt with. And I'm very pleased to report that as of today, there are less than 100 of those claims. The backlog has been substantively eliminated. From the 32,000, eventually it was down to 5,500 in 2017, and we dedicated a task force to work on that. And as of now, there are less than 1,000 principal claims, which are being dealt with now by the Refugee Protection Division. The backlog is effectively eliminated.
Thank you. And in this year's budget, there was an even greater investment put in of $208 million going to IRB over the next 2 fiscal years. How will this money be used? How many new staff will be hired with this money that's being committed? And how do you see these resources helping to address the current number of claims in the system?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As the member pointed out, Budget 2019 follows investments in Budget 2018 of $208 million. This will allow the IRB over the next 24 months to staff an additional 450 people, in addition to the 250 from Budget 2018. Those monies are being allocated to hire additional decision makers. Refugee protection decision makers will grow from 120 to 300 decision makers, and Refugee Appeal Division Governor and Council appointees will grow from 70 to 103 this year, and close to 120 next year. There are also, as Ms. McDonald pointed out, investments associated with IT investments to allow us to achieve the objectives that we've been discussing. And of course, there is important money set aside for space, accommodations, various enablers to help us grow as an organization.
Are we still holding hearings within, scheduling them within the 60-day time period?
No, we are no longer scheduling within the 60-day time period. As a matter of course, we have found that we've been able to find increased efficiencies and improve productivity with a more balanced scheduling practice that allows us to move forward with assigning files to members who have expertise in certain countries, for example. That produces significant economies of scale, and also files that have been in the system a little longer, older files, almost on a first-in, first-out basis. For natural justice reasons, claimants are able to get their disclosure and their evidence ready, so we have a better hearing, and security screening and other public safety and security issues are better able to be addressed as well. The 60 days provided some challenges for the board to manage.
So it sounds like we've been working to improve and invest into the system. And you've mentioned increased productivity at IRB. Do you have any specific numbers that can speak to how that productivity can be measured in a quantitative way?
Thank you. It's
Go ahead, Mr. Wex.
Thank you. We've looked at the entire decision-making continuum from, as Ms. McDonald pointed out, re-engineering the front-end intake all the way to recourse. We've introduced a number of productivity and efficiency measures. It's difficult to quantify, of course, but the task force alone, which wasn't a task force to process less complex claims, alone this year finalized some 5,000 decisions since January out of 35,000. So you could see some significant additional efficiencies that were not there prior to these new innovative approaches.
Thank you, Mr. Wex. We'll now move to Mr. Arsenault, please.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your answers. I don't have Mr. Christofferson's or Ms. Mendez experience with the file before us today, but I could tell you that during my first mandate, every time I talked about immigration and refugees in my writing, stakeholders who have been there have said that government after government are such that they cannot change the situation where these departments become labyrinths. A lot of funds have been invested this year and last year. I am persuaded that just money is not the panacea to solve this problem. The Auditor General indicates that most of the backlogs are caused by administrative problems, not funding issues. A deficient IT system, IT systems that aren't interoperable between departments, the use of paper instead of digital, the doubling of efforts between different organizations. This is bureaucracy in its most pejorative sense. Ms. McDonald, Mr. Wex, I have the following question. Before the Auditor General began his investigation, before the Auditor General even called you, had you gotten together to discuss the very real problems that you were facing when it came to accepting refugee claims in order to fix your problems regarding these administrative slowdowns in your various departments? Thank you for the question.
Extremely hard over the past number of years, and certainly in the past 2 to 3 years, as the pressures have been mounting on the system, to take a look at ourselves inwardly in terms of what are those pressures, why are they there, are we contributing to them, and how do we resolve them. One of the reasons that we advanced an independent review was because we wanted a set of outside eyes to take a look at us to say, how do we actually address some of these issues? We were very cognizant that there were issues in terms of the system. That report was a platform for us. The OAG's report helped in terms of some of the issues that were identified in our independent review. It reinforced that to us. Along that continuum, though, a number of initiatives were already started to try and address some of these issues that we have been facing.
Monsieur Wex, je repose la même question.
Mr. Wex, I have the same problem, the same question for you. Before the Auditor General came to knock on your door, did your office realize that there were problems from the previous century that were occurring in your department? And did you try with a team to intervene and solve this problem?
And comments of Ms. McDonald that the folks here at this table are absolutely seized of this issue and have been since they've been in their positions. Although the Auditor General's report has been extremely helpful to us, I can't say that there were a lot of surprises.
Je vous interromps, Monsieur Wex.
I'm going to interrupt you, Mr. Wex. I know that the report of the Auditor General is very helpful. I understand that. But it seems to me that the problems that were raised is something that your organizations and agencies should have realized well before and dealt with.
Although the Auditor General's reports were helpful, we already were seized of this, and as an example, the Auditor General had recommended or has recommended that we pursue finalizing and reviewing less complex claims, expedited claims. That, in fact, is something that we initiated before the audit. It so happens that the audit recommended that we do it, and I'm glad that the OAG has made recommendations that complement our efforts. And of course, they've identified some issues that we weren't fully seized of. But yes, we were seized of these issues. We've been working together in the context of the Asylum System Management Board. There are significant issues here that have been exacerbated over the past 2 years, and we collectively are working hard to address those issues.
Merci. J'ai 20 secondes.
Thank you. I have 20 seconds. Mr. Ricard. 1 million refugees in Germany in 2015, 100,000 in France last year, 1 million going to Colombia from Venezuela. Do you have comparative studies to see how these countries were able to accept this influx of refugees, in some case illegal ones?
On n'a pas fait d'analyse.
No, we did not conduct a comparative analysis. We simply gave them an idea in order to have an informed discussion.
Obviously, Mr. Arsenault's question is a very good question. Other countries deal with this, or do they? And what are the best practices? Are we adopting them? Are you looking at other countries' best practices?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. And I would say that one of the other things that we're seized with is actually looking at what's happening around the world. We're participating in a number of forums, both domestically and internationally. In fact, in June of this year, we're hosting the Metropolis. It's a pretty significant international conference where you bring people together from around the world who are talking about these very issues with respect to how they're managing the migration movement, how they're dealing with the influx of refugees, what their systems are, what they're working on, and how we can learn from them. Many other countries actually learn lessons from Canada because of the nature of our system, that in fact there are many years of welcoming immigrants to our country and refugees. They look at us for lessons learned. At the same time, we're looking at the impacts of other countries. We were just recently in Germany looking at some of their lessons learned to see, are there things that we could adopt here? Are there things actually that we are replicating that we shouldn't be? And what's the learned advice out there with respect to how we can actually improve our system?
Thank you. Now, Mr. Christopherson.
Still in the same, you're back again?
Well, you had asked for some extra time, right?
Oh, that was on another matter? Business. When we're finished this, you were going to go to committee business.
I wanted to do it. I'll give you the last word here.
On this file?
On both.
Okay, on both. Very good. Well, my understanding in talking with colleagues is that there was some interest in calling them back. I don't know whether we want to move that motion. I think there was a notional date of June 6th.
I think from what we've heard today, that's what I thought your motion was going to deal with. But yeah, there has been from government side and from all opposition
official
sides
opposition, too.
as well that we have you back. I mean, this is still some questions that need to be answered here. And so, in a way, if we can...
If I may, Mr.
Yeah, go
Chair.
ahead, Madam Mendez. Quickly, though.
I think this is a big issue for all of us. I mean, not just because we deal with it in our constituency offices, but because it is a big issue for Canada. Which is why we think that it's appropriate that we invite you back. And the 6th of June, maybe just an
6th
hour,
of June,
we'll
I
see.
think, is a Thursday.
It's a Thursday, yes.
And if I might, Chair, just internal business, but here we go. I would suggest, too, that we find time to have a meeting of the of the committee to meet ahead of time so that we've kind of taken this big issue, tried to get our arms around it. I really think we need a strategic meeting prior to the next one. Additionally, I'd like to see somebody there from the Auditor General's office to help us so that we can hone in on the questions that we all have and try to provide a framework for answers that will actually end up getting us somewhere. So if I can leave that with you, Chair. And then I have one other motion on a related but different issue.
Let's start with this one. Does
Yep.
everybody
Yeah,
agree?
I think from what I understand, most parties, most sides are supportive of this. Can we invite you right now, just at this meeting, for the morning of
The 6th.
June 6th? Good. Looks like everyone's going to be able to make it. Thank you. All right, Mr. McChristofferson, you had another point.
I do. I have a notice of motion, Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And I have it, I'll read it in English, but I have it in both languages to be tabled. I move that the committee condemns the underfunding of the Office of the Auditor General, that the committee recommend that funding to the Office of the Auditor General be increased by $10.8 million annually, and that the committee report this recommendation to the House.
All right, thank you.
We're not discussing it now?
No, it's
You're
a
just
notice
giving
of motion.
Okay,
Yeah,
notice of
okay.
motion, thank you.
So we'll bring it back next. I'll have amendments. I'll just let you.
All right, thank you. I think that's all we will go to today. We will look forward to the June 6th meeting. I want committee to stick around. We have 10 minutes just to discuss a couple of issues out of this meeting and others. And so I want to thank you. The question really didn't come straight out. Maybe it will next time. Canadians may be wondering why there was a big surge of asylum seekers. I think that's one of the things. When you see a spike like that, at that point in time, maybe they need a little more information on why. Maybe that's for next time. But I think from what we've heard today, there is a real concern amongst all members that we're going to have this backlog of asylum claims, and so we want to see how this can best be rectified. So thank you for being here today. We're going to suspend. We'll come back in camera. So that means that we would kindly ask all to exit as quickly as possible so that we can, as a committee, meet. We're suspended.